to the Krueg Show. Larry Krueger, Ryan Smith. We welcome in Jordan Elliot, Niners Nation staff writer. Great follow on Twitter @splash_cousin. Niners embarrassed, I thought, Sunday by the Chiefs. Just absolutely run off their home field by the Chiefs. The Rams are next. A lot of pressure in 49er land. They just traded for Christian McCaffrey. The trade deadline's approaching. Will they make another trade? Do they need to make another trade? And how are they looking at this point? And it seems like the fans there's an awful lot of discontent with Kyle Shanahan brewing. A lot of people pointing the fingers at a number of different directions. So we bring in Jordan Elliot to talk a little 49er football. Jordan, good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys too. I wish it was a more joyous occasion, but unfortunately, Sunday happened the way it did, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a interesting game to watch. Let's get right into the people that are critical of Kyle Shanahan. The 49ers are 7-30 in the Shanahan era when they trail at halftime. And that number has gotten floated around. They struggle to overcome even the smallest of deficits in the second half. It was a 1-point deficit at halftime against Kansas City, and then Kansas City came out. They had a huge special teams play to get their third quarter rolling, and you looked up, and pretty soon, it was instead of 14-13, it was 21-13, and the 49ers really never got any closer than that. It was pretty much non-competitive football most of the second half. What do you make of or I guess how would you evaluate Kyle Shanahan and the era right now? When you hear they're 7-30 when they trail at halftime, is that an indictment on his scheme? Is that more about Jimmy? How would you read? I guess where is Shanahan in your mind right now? Because he's taken a lot of criticism.
I still think that he's a good head coach. I think the results have been there, and I think it's so hard to care about what happened in years past after a game like Sunday. And I understand the attention span of an NFL fan. Typically, it's a "what have you done for me lately" type of sport. I do think there is a bit of concern with the way the offense seems to stall out in the second half. I think the blame isn't solely on Kyle Shanahan, but ultimately he's the one who's running the show. He's the one who's calling the plays. He's the one who does bear when you have such scattered blame, he's ultimately the one person who's going to take the brunt of it because of his role. I do think, though, that a lot of it does get blown a little bit out of proportion. Akash Enavarathan from Niners Nation, somebody who I work with, pulled a great stat. He pulled the records when trailing by 3+ points going into the fourth quarter since 2017. So Kyle's 1-29, which on the surface is not good. It's something that I understand people have been very upset about. But Sean McVay is 3-25 in those same scenarios. John Harbaugh is 4-21. Bill Belichick's 4-25. So while Shanahan's been a little bit below average in those situations, I think that unfortunately what has happened is we've seen a couple transcendent QB talents enter the league in recent years. You get so oversaturated with Mahomes and Josh Allen and even some of the old guard with Brady and Rodgers that it makes these fourth quarter comebacks, I think, feel a little bit easier than they really are. And I think the combination of it being really difficult in general league-wide and the fact the 49ers don't really have the quarterback and scheme marriage to pull it off is why I think you're seeing that lack of success there in the second half.
It is interesting, isn't it? I mean, Shanahan is 1-30 when trailing by 3+ points in the fourth quarter. And as you said, nobody's got great numbers in those situations. So you have to factor that in.
Because also you hear 3 and then that automatically in your brain is like, oh my God, only down 3, he still can't win. But it's like, okay, but also there's a million of those games where they're down 20, they're down 15, they're down 18. And so it's like a little bit misleading that way as well.
The loss to the Chiefs was the third time this season that the Niners have committed 9 or more penalties in a game. They've committed 7 or more penalties in 4 of their 7 games they've played so far this season. How much is that on the coaching staff that they're committing penalties in mass?
So this is where it gets really hard, right? Because the coaching staff isn't on the field, but ultimately I still think they bear the brunt of the responsibility. I don't know how great this analogy is, but like I've held managerial roles in the past, and I had to oversee a department with people, working that I was responsible for their production, right? And if they weren't performing up to a certain standard, I was ultimately the one that was held responsible. And I think football is no different in the sense that, yes, Kyle Shanahan and his position coaches aren't the ones making these mistakes, but they're ultimately the ones responsible for having these players be in a position to execute. And the biggest thing that I would probably be concerned about is the 49ers aren't this up-and-coming team with a bunch of guys on rookie deals who are still kind of, getting used to the NFL. It's a team full of veteran superstar level, all-pro caliber players, and they make rookie mistakes week after week after week. And at a certain point, like, yes, the players deserve – I'd say it's probably 50-50. The players deserve the blame for making the mistakes. But you can't – the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I don't know if they're doing different things during practice, but the results have been the same. And it hasn't just been this season. It feels like the last couple seasons, they've just had so many backbreaking penalties that a veteran team this talented shouldn't have. So I would say ultimately, yes, as the person who is overseeing all of this, Kyle Shanahan deserves some blame until something changes and we start seeing the, positive regression in that area.
Hey, Jordan, building off that same point Larry just made, there's been some talk made of like, where's the hurry up offense? Why? They're in these desperate situations, and it seems like they're taking their merry time. One thing I've noticed is like it seems like they are getting these back-breaking penalties on those same drives. So it's kind of in my mind, do you think that part of the reason why they're not going so fast is because they don't trust guys like Brendel to not make mistakes in the hurry up offense?
I think a lot of it comes from the fact that Kyle Shanahan wants to have as much control as possible without obviously having the ability to be out there on the field himself. And I think it does stem not necessarily from not wanting to commit penalties. I think that, or as the sole reason, I think that does factor in. But I think that he just feels like their ability to kind of like the tempo and pace they want to play at is huddling up, not being rushed to the line, really having time to get set, look at what the defense is showing, maybe change things up after that. And I think that it again ties back into the biggest concern I had with the 49ers this year before Jimmy ever took over. It was when Trey was still the quarterback. Was I didn't feel like the offense was built to come from behind if they had a deficit early on. And I think you're right. Like, I think they aren't really a team that is equipped to go into hurry up and just, run 10 plays in a row, throwing the ball, over and over and over again in a 2-minute drill. I couldn't tell you the reason why, they're not doing it, but I just feel like from the outside looking in, they aren't really equipped to do that. And if that's why Shanahan didn't feel comfortable doing it, I would say that would be the most logical response. That would make sense to me.
Let's talk about the O-line for a second, because looking at the pressures that were allowed by the O-line against the Chiefs, and this is a Pro Football Focus area, and, I always have to kind of tread lightly on the Pro Football Focus stuff because sometimes I think it doesn't represent itself for what it really is. I mean, but they have McGlinchey as 4 pressures, 2 sacks allowed. Trent Williams, 2 pressures, 1 sack allowed. Spencer Burford had, basically 1 pressure, and it was clean for everybody else. Kansas City did their damage against the 49er tackles. They even lined up Chris Jones at end to try to pick on McGlinchey, who's clearly, diminished compared to what he was at the beginning of the year. The highest graded Niner player, interestingly, against Kansas City, according to Pro Football Focus, was Aaron Banks. Yep. The left guard had a 91.5 grade. He's yet to allow a sack this season. But we focused so much on the interior of Brendel and Burford and Banks that we almost took like the tackles and assumed they were going to play at a high level. And now here we are roughly mid-season, and it looks like Trent Williams has regressed, and Mike McGlinchey just looks so banged up that he doesn't look like he's even close to 100%. And it's like the Niner O-line has been a little bit more dependable in the interior and a lot less dependable at the tackle spots. was this one game an aberration? Do you think this is consistent with what we've seen this season?
I think it's a lot of the things you said are absolutely true. For starters, I don't know if you remember, like earlier in the season when I was talking with you, I said that I think it's really tough to evaluate Trent Williams because it does appear like he's regressed from last season. But last season, he was almost perfect. So I still think he's playing at a very high level. But I just think you're seeing a couple plays a game that last season when he was near perfect last year, you weren't really seeing. And that's kind of altering the perception. And then with Mike McGlinchey, I think the biggest problem with McGlinchey is that he gets beat extremely badly in very big spots, and then it overshadows the larger body of work. So I'm about 3/4 of the way done rewatching the offensive film, taking my notes and doing the stuff I do during the week. And there's a handful of plays where he looked really good. There was a play where he got just, mauled on what should have been an illegal hands to the face by Frank Clark, and he stood tall, dropped his anchor, and Jimmy had time to get the ball off for a first down. But what happens is he gets, driven into the turf, or he gets just beat really bad. There's a play where Chris Jones beat him really bad. And it always seems to coincide with a very big moment. And I think that that's what makes it appear much worse than, because we can't weigh everything equally, right? Like a 1st and 10 from your own 25-yard line isn't going to have the same weight as giving up a sack in the red zone when you could be getting 7 instead of 3. And I think with McGlinchey, the reason why he appears to be so, poor in the eyes of fans is because those really bad reps always seem to happen at the worst time. And then it does overshadow a lot of the great stuff he's doing on 1st and 10, on 2nd and 6, and the things he's doing in the run game. So I definitely think that the tackle position got beat at bad times. And there's even the play, like the safety in the end zone. I thought Trent Williams was completely fine on that play. To be honest, I thought that was 100% on Jimmy. He took way too many steps into the backfield, and had he stepped up in the pocket, that's a completely, Trent Williams is keeping him clean. Part of that does have to do with the quarterback. There was even a sack that McGlinchey gave up where it felt like Jimmy held onto the ball a little bit too long. So I do agree, though, with the sentiment that it's kind of, ironic that all the concern was about the interior of the offensive line. And I wrote an article for Niners Nation today. Banks and Burford have actually been a top 5 guard tandem in terms of, pass blocking this year. And I don't think anybody saw us being in week 8 now and the concerns about Trent Williams and Michael McGlinchey rather than the first-year starter in his second season and the rookie right guard who hadn't played right guard the year before. So I agree there. I just think, again, it's just the worst possible outcomes happened at the worst possible moments. And I think that overshadowed the overall body of work because I don't think they were getting beat as badly all afternoon as it's been made out to be over the last few days on social media.
We are going to get to the defense because the defense obviously had a huge nightmare day, but we're starting with the offense because I think there's a number of interesting points here. I read this today, guys. The 49ers had 1st and 10 at the KC 19. They had a 1st and 10 on another drive at the KC 27. They had a 1st and 10 at the KC 12. And they had a 1st and 10 at the KC 34. So they had 4 different drives where they had a 1st and 10 inside the 34. And they came away with a total of 9 points, 4 possessions inside the opponent's 35-yard line. And it resulted in 3 field goals. And against Mahomes, I mean, it's just and this Kansas City offense, I mean, you can point to that right there as one of the main failings from Sunday. It's if you get Kansas City in the red zone, you have to score touchdowns at a decent clip. And if you're just going to settle for field goal after field goal after field goal, I mean, just get ready to be wiped out in the second half because KC can score. What is there any consistent theme that you or Ryan, if you have a thought on this, as far as what is the 49ers' primary issue inside the red zone?
My thought is, well, first of all, it goes back to kind of the Mike McGlinchey thing. It's he is a good run blocker. And when he's on 1st and 10, it's when you're driving and they can just run the Kyle Shanahan offense, he looks pretty good. But when it gets to critical downs, especially when it's an obvious passing down, that's where he kind of runs into trouble. And honestly, I'm going to say that's a big reason why they got Christian McCaffrey. Because I think McCaffrey, people talk about, why are you spending all that money on a running back? They brought him in as a weapon. He's there for critical downs, critical third downs, critical downs in the red zone. I mean, You said you haven't finished the offense. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are watching them in the red zone. But to me, it did seem like there was a couple plays where, like, Jimmy kind of threaded the needle, sort of maybe hit Ayuk on the hands. It would have been a really tough catch. There's another one where he kind of hit Kittle in the hands. It would have been a tough catch, but it didn't seem like there was any, like, oh my God, guy wide open in the end zone sort of things being schemed up. And I'm hoping that comes with McCaffrey. Jordan.
So, like, off the top of my head, I can recall, like, I don't know if you're talking about the same one, but there was, I think it was the first drive of the game, actually. They had Ayuk on a little slant man coverage. To me, that one's more on the receiver than it is Jimmy. I thought it was in a spot where he could have got it. He dropped a ball. It happens. I thought the DB made a good play on the ball as well. So you have that. That's one where it's like, hey, like, the play calling worked. The quarterback, had put the ball in a good spot. It just didn't work out, right? Another one I can think of is that interception that Jimmy threw, which was just egregious. Kansas City sent the house. They sent a cover zero blitz, and the 49ers had a Texas route running out of the backfield with Jeff Wilson. And when the 49ers run Texas or choice out of the backfield against cover zero, that's typically the hot route, and that's typically the read that the quarterback has to make. They have to identify that cover zero coverage and get the ball in the hands of that player running that route. 49ers fans probably remember when the 49ers beat the Arizona Cardinals in, I forget what week it was, but it was the home game in 2019, and the game-winning touchdown of Jeff Wilson. It was very similar, where Arizona sent a cover zero blitz. They had that, angle route. I believe that one was choice. That was Texas on Sunday, but basically the same thing. And that one's more on Jimmy, right? So this is where it comes back to, like, people are calling for Shanahan's head and saying his play calling's terrible. Well, his play call had a running back running wide open with nobody covering him, where he's going to walk into the end zone untouched. And so it's like there just has been this disconnect, is basically the point I'm trying to make, where it feels like we haven't seen all facets of the offense playing with cohesion in a way that would make you feel confident that it's going to, kind of rectify itself going forward. Because I think the play calling was fine for the most part. I thought that Jimmy had a couple good throws that were dropped, and I thought he had, like, that interception that he threw was just, you can't do that, right? Like, that's just terrible. The most concerning thing I will say is this. Kansas City was the 29th ranked red zone defense in the league going into this game too. So it's not like they went up against a team that was, stonewalling teams in the red zone all year. If I recall correctly, because I wrote about it last week, Kansas City was allowing like 75% of opponents' drives in the red zone to end in a touchdown. So that's the thing to me where I'd really be coming away not feeling great about it, is this was an opponent that they should have been able to right the ship against. And even if they didn't win the game, maybe build some momentum in the red zone. And it felt like they just fell flat on their face.
It's a great point and great stat there. Let's hit the chat for a couple comments here. Emiliano O says, Jimmy also was throwing at the feet and behind receivers. Receivers and running backs have to get into a rhythm. Too inaccurate passes don't help with that. We also have a couple here that I think are pretty good. Digital Drew says red zone apathy. When you shorten the field and have a quarterback who cannot throw to the corners consistently, you get defenses stacking the middle. Stacking the middle is how you beat Jimmy. And then one more here from Paul Perriman, who's had a number of very negative comments here in the chat, which sometimes I like. Paul says Jimmy G is the only quarterback in the history of football who could throw an interception in the end zone, have a safety, fumble the ball, and still get excuses thrown his way. Also took a sack to take them out of field goal range. We know that Jimmy's flawed, right? But if I say, and here's something that I saw that I thought was really interesting. Kyle Shanahan called runs on 7 of the Niners' first 11 plays against Kansas City, and they had some success. They wound up getting up 10-0. They ran the ball after getting up 10-0 only 14 times the rest of the game. This is 2 weeks in a row now. He's kind of abandoned the run. 2 weeks ago, they got, even. They fell into a 14-0 hole, but quickly erased it and were 14-14. And yet it was like the run game was just a total afterthought, really the entire rest of the game. And in this game, you could say the same thing. I mean, it was 10-0. They've got 7 runs in the first 11 plays and then 14 runs the rest of the day. I guess the question is this: the Niners' struggles offensively, in your mind, are more attributable to Kyle and what he's responsible for, or for Jimmy and the obvious limitations and weaknesses that he has? If I threw that question to you, are there struggles more about things that are on Kyle's plate, or more things that are on Jimmy's plate? Or maybe that's too hard to generalize.
I think it is. I think there is more nuance, but I'd be more than happy to answer it because I think that it ultimately does come down to Jimmy because he's the one who needs to execute. And based on just what I've seen this season, far more times I've come away with it being an issue where the quarterback isn't executing rather than it being on the play caller. But I also think that a lot of it does have to do with the 49ers are in this spot where even when Jimmy is executing, then you have like that couple drops in Atlanta that were just, horrible. That really shifted the way that game flow was going. So I would say it's more on Jimmy than Kyle, but I would say it's the offense collectively more than Kyle. And the conversation shifts if you want to say how much Kyle deserves the blame for not having his players in a position to execute. But if it's one or the other, I don't think that it's been like Kyle's been calling terrible games. I think a lot of the stuff that he has been calling has worked and he's gotten the looks he's wanted against the coverages and the fronts he's been presented. They just haven't been able to get the results. And ultimately the results are always going to be what fans care about. They don't care if a guy is running wide open if he's not actually coming down with the football. So I would pin it more on the offense and the person leading the offense than the person calling the plays.
What do you think, Ryan?
For me, I mean, I have a hard time even answering that. I guess I'd lean maybe slightly Jimmy, but like this week, I don't know, watching from the press, but I thought Jimmy played well. I thought that like he's going to get, it's similar to McGlinchey where it's like he has these brutal back-breaking plays that everyone, like even in the press box, you can kind of hear people kind of laughing and cheering when he's like getting sacked in the end zone or whatever. And it's like he has these back-breaking plays, but nobody talks about the fact that, okay, his offensive line, holding, now they're backed up in their Kansas City side of the field. And now it's, 3rd and 20 and he's completing these passes. I mean, they only punted one time in the game when Jimmy was out there. And that punt was a result of a hold by Jalen Moore that kicked him out of field goal range. So it's like I thought the offense played well. I actually think that the dirty little secret that nobody is really talking about is, and I don't know if it has to do with Debo and his hamstring, but I'm not really seeing the receivers getting that wide open. And I don't think it's fair to really necessarily blame Kyle for that. I don't know if it's designed, but it doesn't seem like guys are really getting that wide open or getting that separation. And it seemed like the Kansas City defense they were flying around. They looked faster than the 49ers defense. They were stuffing the run. Yeah, I don't know. I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on that after watching the film. What were your thoughts on the receivers this game?
What do you think, Jordan, as far as, Grant, did the whole thing yesterday with Grant. He thinks that Debo's out of shape and hasn't been in good shape all year. Ayuk, at times has had some great moments. He was dominant in camp, but he's had a hard time getting it rolling. What do you think of Rye's premise that the receivers are having a hard time separating from the coverage?
And they're leading the league in drop percentage.
I would say that, so first of all, I would exclude Brandon Ayuk from that because one of my biggest takeaways the last 2 weeks is he just looks like a star. Like he looks like somebody, his release package, especially when teams throw him into, a man coverage look where he just has to beat one guy. He's cooking defensive backs off the line with his release package. So I think Ayuk is far and away he's been better at separating than anybody. And there's even a ton of, plays where the ball isn't going his way. And if you are looking and seeing on the All-22, again, it depends where the progressions are. It's not as simple as, Ayuk was open on the other side of the field. It's not quite that simple. But even when he's not a part of the first initial progressions, he's still cooking these guys when he's being left alone in man coverage. So I think Ayuk deserves to be kind of left out of this based on the way he's played. But I do agree, like there has to be some concern, right? So Deebo Samuel is a superstar, I think. I think that he, with the ball in his hands, is just – there's nobody else in the league like him. And the things that he's able to do, the way he's able to make defenders miss, the angles he takes as a ball carrier, he's a special talent. But if we're talking strictly as a wide receiver and doing the things that typically a number one wide receiver making that money does, I don't think he's in that same tier. I don't think he's winning the same way, a Justin Jefferson does or a Jamar Chase does or a Cooper Kupp even does, right? So I don't necessarily, agree that he's out of shape because I think that he looks very similar to how we've seen the last couple of years. But I also think that this has always kind of been part of Deebo's game. Like I don't think he is somebody where he's going to win a ton just routing defensive backs and getting that separation one-on-one. Not to say I don't want it to come across like I'm saying he's not good at running routes, but I don't think that that's the area of his game that got him the massive contract he deserved. I think he's somebody where you have to just be creative in getting him the ball in the short area of the field, which they have, and he wins a ton. He's a guy, he can run a little, crossing route 5 yards upfield and turn that into a 70-yard touchdown, and that's always kind of going to be the best version of him in my eyes. So I wouldn't say that I think he's out of shape, but I do think that you're seeing teams adjust a bit to that. And, you have a play like that slant that he was running where Jimmy threw the ball behind him. Like, you can't miss opportunities like that with Deebo, because when you get Deebo the ball in space with a head of steam, we've seen what that does and the big gains those rack up. So I think that, I wouldn't say that they're having trouble, separating, as much as I just think that like Ayuk's only been the only dependable receiver in terms of being able to separate consistently when teams are going into press man on 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6 or whatever.
The one thing I've seen with Deebo is that, you got to remember that even though he's dynamic as a runner, he doesn't have the confidence or ability to kind of pick and slide in short areas. So I'd rather see him on end arounds and reverses to the wide side of the field, where he has more room to set up his blocks and more room to cut, than on the short side of the field where it's really about pick and slide and find your hole. He needs his momentum going forward. And he's a much tougher guy to tackle when he's in full stride, because he weighs 215 or 220 pounds, than he is if you just have him run to the short side of the field and there's no room there and he's got to pick and slide and get in between defenders and then take it upfield. It seems like when he goes to the short side of the field, he winds up running out of bounds, or maybe he gets a 2-yard gain. But if you can get him on anything to the wide side of the field where he's got room to set up his blocks, he might be able to take it the distance. I mean, I just think he needs more space. They need to scheme for him more space in some of the run plays that are called for him. Let's get to Christian McCaffrey. What did you think of McCaffrey? Both of you guys, what did you think of the decision to trade for McCaffrey, the price that they paid to acquire McCaffrey, and what did you think of his first game?
Did you want to go first, Ryan, or?
Sure. I'll take it. I mean, I thought he looked excellent I actually wasn't expecting him to play as much as he did. I mean, there was, watching the Baldy breakdown, you could see kind of Juice Check's out there kind of coaching him up. He's just like, dude, follow me, man. And you're going to get 10 yards. And there was a couple times where he didn't follow him and he cut it inside, and those were kind of meh runs. But I mean, he was the only running back that caught a target. His 2 routes, or his 2 times he got the ball in his hands, I think they were 10-yard runs. I mean, the funny thing is, what we're talking about with the receivers, it's like, honestly, Deebo with the ball in his hands might be better than McCaffrey. McCaffrey, I almost definitely think is a better route runner than Deebo. So I think that sort of, just the fact that they have 2 weapons like that, 2 weapons that are unlike more multiple in those ways than any other guys in the whole NFL. I just think you give Kyle, I think we're going to see a lot, like 80% of it in the Rams game. And then I think after this bye, it's similar to last year when Kyle discovered, the running Deebo thing. That was when they were 3-5 and they broke it out against the Rams. I think that's what McCaffrey's going to bring to this team this year, is some sort of crazy element that no other team can have.
Yeah, I think that, I'll be honest, Larry, when I saw the trade went down, I was like, okay, this guy is perfect for what Shanahan wants to do. I think that he adds the receiving threat that Shanahan always wanted in Jerick McKinnon, hasn't really had from any of the running backs he's had, as talented as a lot of them have been. But when I saw the compensation, I was like, that's steep. That's a lot to give up. Christian McCaffrey is an incredible talent. He's also in his 6th year in the NFL. He's also had some injury, concerns over the last couple of years. And just typically running backs don't age, gracefully with the kind of workload he's been given. But I've been trying to look at it more so as removing the running back label and just looking at it as kind of that cliche offensive weapon that we always hear thrown around, right? And I like the move in the sense that it gives the 49ers and it gives Kyle Shanahan the best running back that he has ever had as a play caller. And he's had some pretty good ones over the years. I think the best one he's had since he's been in San Francisco is Raheem Mostert. I think Mostert's criminally underrated. He's very talented. But what McCaffrey does as the total package with all due respect to Raheem Mostert, is just it's on a different level, right? So I think the ability that he brings as a receiver, and I agree, Ryan, honestly, you could make a strong argument that Christian McCaffrey is the second best pure receiver on the 49ers right now behind Brandon Ayuk. Like, he is that good. And I don't think it's as much of an indictment on the other players as much as it's like, no, like Christian McCaffrey is that guy. And I think we've been a little bit more privy to it because we saw a lot of those late night games at Stanford. We don't have that East Coast bias. We saw what Christian McCaffrey was coming into the NFL. So I think a lot of people here in the Bay Area can appreciate the talent that he has and the completeness that he plays with. But it's, like I said, it's a lot to give up. So I will say the first initial sample we saw was very encouraging. He averaged 6.2 yards per touch on 10 touches. Half of those touches went for over 9 yards. And I thought there were a couple plays, like the first play of the game, they ran the 15F sift, which is basically it's blocked like outside zone to the left, but it's a toss to the inside that you can cut back with. And you can see the agility, the footwork, the vision, all those things where in this modern age where running backs have really been devalued and there's this mentality where you can just throw anybody back there and they're going to get X amount of yards in Kyle's system. We're seeing what it's like when you really get that dynamic talent in there. I will say this, the real value to me will come going forward when we get to see him on third downs. I think that it was smart to keep him out. I don't think he played a single third down against the Chiefs. And I'd imagine a lot of that has to do with not having the protection verbiage, only being there for 48 hours or whatever it was before the game. But you know, it's so funny. People always complain about Kyle running players into the ground, but you almost have to give him that kind of workload to justify the compensation that was given up because, again, to me, that was a lot to give up for him at this stage in his career, but I think the talent speaks for itself. So it's just a matter of, like, if he can stay healthy, I think it'll be worth it. But, man, if something happens, if he gets banged up or, you know, the usage isn't where we, you know, think it should be, it could end up looking really bad really quick, in my opinion.
I like the trade. I think they're inside their Super Bowl window. I think this guy's a difference maker who could be better for the Niners than he's been with the Panthers. Digital Drew says CMC may bring a much needed boost to the lateral game for the Niners. What he means by that are swing passes and quick pops out of the backfield will change the defensive scheme. Kittle and Debo will eat with him on the field more. I agree with that. I'd like to see putting CMC in space more, and because I just think he's a house call waiting to happen. I mean, he's got home run hitter ability. He's got the ability to make a guy miss and go the distance and take a little swing pass and go 80 yards. And that kind of, to me, that's a unique skill set. I don't want to see him as much between the tackles. I think they've got other backs that can really feast in there, and most specifically Jeff Wilson. But I think TDP could be in there, Jordan Mason. I'd like to see McCaffrey in space, and if they can get him in space, I think he's a difference-making player. I'm not as concerned. I'm a draft pick guy. I'm a draft guy. I really believe that you build through the draft. But when I saw Dave Lombardi list that they have 8 picks in next year's draft and they can still accumulate more if D'Amico goes elsewhere, 8 picks is a lot of players in the draft. And the 49ers have shown such a propensity to find guys on day 3 and in the undrafted market that and they seemingly have swung and missed a lot at the top of the draft. It just, to me, I like it. It's more of a sure thing, and then taking a chance on them getting it right in the draft. They get it right sometimes they get it wrong. And so this takes the guesswork out of it. I'd be more concerned if they didn't have all those comp picks and if they didn't have all those picks coming for minority coaches signing elsewhere. I think that enables them to make a trade like this make it more palatable to their future. It's not like they traded away their whole future because they still have 8 picks and may wind up with 10. So, and they can always, move around and acquire more picks if need be. And they've shown such an ability to find the undrafted free agents. And so a lot of those guys are better than the guys they draft, from Raheem Mostert to Kevin Givens to Azeez Al-Shaair, and we could go on and on. that I'm not as concerned with the price they paid. I like them being aggressive in their Super Bowl window, and they're in their Super Bowl window. And then if there was if Kansas City and Buffalo were in the NFC, I don't think they would have made that trade. I don't think I would have made that trade. But the fact of the matter is, if they can go back to the Super Bowl, even if they wind up losing the Super Bowl, that in and of itself is a successful season. So I think they absolutely were right to be aggressive. Now, that being said, the trade deadline's coming up here first week in November. So we're about a week away from the trade deadline, and there's still trades that could be made. I saw a rumor today that Kirk Cousins to the 49ers, that the gossip involving a trade involving Kirk Cousins coming to the 49ers from somebody Vikings territory, had that on Twitter today. There's speculation that the Packers may lose to the Bucks or to the Bills this weekend big, and that they may look to move Aaron Rodgers. And then there's an awful lot of smoke around Tom Brady. Where do you think the 49ers are wed to going the rest of the way with Garoppolo, who's very popular with the other players in the room, and they're saying all the right things? Or do you think they're still, they were hedging with Trey, with bringing Garoppolo back, then Trey got hurt? We don't know how they feel about Trey, really. We don't know how they really feel about Garoppolo. And we don't know if any of these other guys like Cousins or Brady or Rodgers will be out there on the table in any capacity. What do you think? And then there's also talk, that the 49ers may be active as far as other positions. William Jackson, the former number one pick, I believe, with the Commanders, the corner, is going to be dealt, they say, or maybe even released after the trade deadline. He's interesting. There was a story today that Cleveland is shopping both Kareem Hunt and Greedy Williams. And now with McCaffrey, they really don't need Kareem Hunt. But Greedy Williams, who's had hamstring problems of his own, if he's healthy, corner, they may be in the market for a corner. How do you see the 49ers approaching this last week before the deadline? Do you think they'll make another move?
I just don't see how they can, Larry. I just feel like, unless they're able to, get a player like a William Jackson for one of their compensatory third-round picks that they have on the books right now, that was part of the reason why I wasn't, thrilled when I saw the compensation they gave up for McCaffrey. I think it limited where they could attack some other areas of need. I still think there's a need if Javon Kinlaw is not going to come back to kind of beef up the interior of the defensive line. With Mosley's obviously not going to come back. That's a huge loss in the secondary. It seems like they're still kind of up in the air with Jason Verrett and his status. You can't, as much as you've seen the ability when he's able to get out there, you can't count on it based on the way that his knee hasn't really reacted in a way where they feel comfortable throwing him out there yet. So I think that maybe there's a small move to be made there. And hey, some of these small moves they've made ended up having a huge impact. Charles Omenihu has been one of the best values in all of football this year. The 49ers gave up a 6th-round pick for him, and right now he has 13.6% pressure rate this year. He's had 3 or more pressures in all but 2 games this season. He's been fantastic. So maybe the 49ers find somebody that they can add, for one of those late picks. They have 4 in the 7th round, and I think 3, if I recall correctly, in the 6th round next year. I apologize if those numbers are off. This is just off the top of my head. But I wouldn't expect a splash move. I know I've seen, Darren Payne thrown around, even like a William Jackson. I just don't think they have the ammunition to get a player like that. And I'm always here for Kirk Cousins and Kyle Shanahan reunion talk, because I think that the biggest regret Kyle Shanahan will have until he wins the Super Bowl with the 49ers is not sticking to his original plan and bringing in Kirk Cousins. I thought you had a very interesting poll I saw on Twitter last night, Larry, where you posted, if you had to win the Super Bowl this season with the 49ers, you had the option of Brady, Jimmy, Rodgers, and Kirk Cousins, who would it be? To me, it's a no-brainer it'd be Cousins, because Cousins is playing better than all of those guys right now, and it's essentially within the same scheme with the exception of Brady. So if the possibility ever existed, I would absolutely pull the trigger and do it. I just don't see why Minnesota would move off of him at this point in time, and I just don't know what the 49ers have to give up. Maybe in the most far-fetched scenario, if Tampa really did punt on the season and they thought they were done, this is, again, purely hypothetical. I could see a scenario that does make sense logically where the 49ers shipped Jimmy there and they got Brady in return. If this is really going to be the last 4 months of Brady's career, the Bucs would have an answer going forward with a quarterback who, as much as fans are frustrated with him right now, he's very serviceable compared to some of the stuff we've seen league-wide. Matt Ryan's a former MVP, and he got benched for Sam Ellinger. Like
Matt Stafford, six touchdowns, 8 interceptions.
Yeah, so it could be worse. So, again, I don't think that's going to happen. But, if we're talking about things that make sense logically, it appears to be a win-win because if this is really Brady's last year, he gets a chance to, come to a team that I think is in a better spot than Tampa right now. He gets to, ride off into the sunset where he grew up here in the Bay Area. And the next year, the Niners can hand the keys back to Trey. You don't have the residual lingering of Jimmy hanging around the roster. And Tampa has an option at the quarterback position going forward beyond Blaine Gabbert and Kyle Trask. So, unless something like that happens, which again is like a 1 in a million kind of thing, I don't know how it happens, Larry, but that would be pretty cool. I'm just throwing it out there. I feel like the puzzle pieces fit.
Well, the one thing that always makes you think that something like that, which sounds wild and there's so many moving parts, but the one thing that always makes you think, well, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, but Don Yee represents both guys. So in some ways, do you really have that many moving parts? Isn't it just a conversation with Don Yee? Isn't it a John Lynch, Don Yee conversation? Because the way Brady is sounding out his Buccaneer lineman, it just doesn't seem like he's going to be there very long. And I'm just speculating. I don't know his situation, but if his whole, marital situation is going south, maybe he would want to be in his backyard with people that he trusts and people that he loves and and who knows, maybe Tom Brady on his bucket list, God knows he's got really nothing to accomplish in the NFL, but who knows? He might have started his career and 5 years in said, some point I'm winning my hometown team a Super Bowl. And maybe that means something to him. And at this point, you got to kind of wonder too. It's like about Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Are they made men and set up and they have no cares in the world? Are they closer to that situation with Jed and Dr. John and Denise? Or is there considerable pressure on Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch to get back into that Super Bowl and get that 6th Lombardi? And man, it's like they're not going to get fired at the end of the year, but they could be on, the time could be ticking in a year from now or 2 years from now. Where do you think Kyle is? He's 6 years in. He's sub 500, but I think we all understand why, right? He took over a bad team. They were bad for 2 years. He's well over 500 since that point. He's gone to 2 of the last 3 NFC Championship games. He's gone to a Super Bowl. Where do you think the expectations of the organization, how much pressure is there on John and Kyle in your mind? I mean, I know that I'm asking you to speculate because this is a question that is specifically for Jed, but Jed's not here. So I'll ask it to you, Jordan.
I think that it's really hard now to gauge it because I think it was 100% tied into whatever happened with Trey Lance. I think if Trey Lance ended up not working out and the 49ers kind of, we're at a point 2 or 3 years from now where some of the older guys, the Armsteads, the Wards, the Kittles, were kind of getting phased out of their prime, and that window that they're in now came and went, and they didn't have a Lombardi to show for it, and they didn't have a franchise quarterback after moving all those picks. I could see the seat being much hotter, but I also think that, just from my observations, I feel like Jed York has grown tremendously over the last 10 years or so, and I think if you ask Jed York today, they might have handled things a little bit differently with the way that Jim Harbaugh exited the organization. And I think Jed York is more aware than anybody of what happened when he left and that kind of no man's land they left themselves in. So I do think there is a bit of pressure on Kyle, but I also think, like, being realistic, it's going to take a couple years to see what happens with Trey. And there would have to be an extremely viable candidate that they would feel great about just plugging in right away. To me, it would have to be like a proven head coach who's been there, who's done that, not some up-and-coming coordinator or some up-and-coming college coach. It would have to be,
somebody who had pelts on the wall.
Exactly, yeah. It would have to be a Sean Payton, a Bill Belichick, if Andy Reid left Kansas City for whatever reason, like something that's probably not going to happen, right? So I just think with Kyle, he's safe until, at least 2025 is probably the year, unless something major happens where there's some, something behind closed doors we don't know about. But if we're talking strictly on-field performance, I think he has the ability to kind of ride out this like window that we're in with some of these guys in their prime, and at least through Trey's rookie deal before they feel confident moving on from him.
Yeah, I think it'd be huge just even if they just make the playoffs this year, then all of a sudden kind of that whole like, oh, he's under 500. All of a sudden you can say, look, last 4 years, even if they get bounced after one game in the playoffs, you can say, look, last 4 years, they made it to the playoffs 3 out of 4. He's got a good record. I mean, his record right now, just including this season and then the last 3, so you could say like the last 4 seasons and including playoffs, is 36-26. So that's pretty good. And that's with one season of kind of injured Jimmy. So I feel like, they just kind of have to make the playoffs this year. I do want to say on the Brady note, though, because Larry and I was at the gym last night and I was on the phone with Larry and we were just kind of messing around talking about this stuff. And he had brought up the idea of Brady being washed. And I did think like, Brady seems a little checked out on this team. I don't know if I'd necessarily say he's washed. Like, it's sort of like his last year in New England, where like when he doesn't trust his receivers, he's a completely different guy. And you think like, what does Brady need? Brady needs a nickelback like James White. Well, they have the best version of that ever in Christian McCaffrey. He needs a Gronk. All of a sudden, they have a prime George Kittle. They already are built to go across the middle the way he likes. So it's a little interesting.
And also, I kind of look at the 49ers right now. It's like if you said, what's the solution offensively? I'd like to see them go back and kind of use what Brady did in his years in New England, where they go 4 wides, they empty the backfield, they throw, they have everybody go short, and then either if it's Garoppolo or Brady, you got McCaffrey, you got Debo, you got Ayuk, you got Kittle, flex these guys out, empty the backfield and try to throw short accurately. And to me, that seems like the scheme that would put the most pressure on opposing defenses right now. Brady to me seems like an ill fit for what Tampa's using him for. They're going down the field. They don't have the O-line to protect. You know what I mean? He's got the arm to go down the field, but it's kind of a low percentage deal. So his numbers don't look good. There's a lot of frustration. There's pressure in his face. If you put him in a situation where he could empty the backfield and just throw it to Christian McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, and in Kyle's system, and you're getting it out quick and lean on that defense, mix in some run, this could be a great fit for him. That's just the way I look at it.
And I would say this too, again, it's reports, it's what we've heard. But so Chris Long played with Brady for a number of years, and he said 10 years ago that the only place he would ever see Brady leaving New England for is San Francisco. And that was, I think it was 2011, if I remember correctly. I know it was over 10 years ago now. And if that was in his mind then, and then you couple that with, I think Seth Wickersham reported that like Wes Welker had said that Brady was like, hey, if you guys come for me, there will be no bidding war. There will be no free agency tour. I'm there. So I feel like, again,
he might be on his bucket list. He might, have the Niners on the bucket list. Who knows?
Yeah, and his family's still local here, in San Mateo. I'm pretty sure the field's named after him at Sarah High School there. Like, he still has ties to the area, and it makes all this, it's so funny because it's so far-fetched, but it makes all the sense in the world. Like, Tampa isn't winning a Super Bowl this year the way they are. The Niners probably aren't winning a Super Bowl the way they are. Tampa could get set up for the future, and the 49ers could cash in right now and rectify the mistake of passing on Brady. God knows how many times they have over the last few years with all the reports we've heard about, them opting to not make a move for him. So, like, yeah, I agree. Like, if it was something as simple as getting in a room with, I think it's Jason Licht. I'm blanking on the GM for the Bucks, but him, John Lynch, and Don Yee on a conference call, like, the NFL loves spectacle and they love a storyline. What better storyline than a blockbuster trade deadline move that brings Brady back home to the Bay Area? And just like you said, like, this scheme, if you get, like, Brady isn't making the mistakes that Jimmy's making, right? If you get a quarterback like that and the defense starts to get healthy, who in the NFC is giving the 49ers a run for their money? Absolutely nobody could match up with them. And you go up against a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen in a hypothetical Super Bowl matchup, you're feeling a hell of a lot better with Tom Brady as your quarterback than you are with Jimmy G right now. So why not?
It seems crazy. But just everybody needs to put that one in their hat and just know that that's a possibility. The other thought is we don't know, truthfully, because they're never going to be honest about this, how Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch feel about what they saw this summer in camp and in the preseason in the first couple of games from Trey Lance. We don't know. They could be anywhere from we are convinced Trey's the guy, and they could be on the opposite end of that. We are convinced Trey's not the guy. So that's the other one. To me, if you talk about Brady, I think Brady you could get for probably Garoppolo and a pick or something like that. You might be able to get him straight up for Garoppolo, heck, at this point. But if you're talking Aaron Rodgers, I think it's that you're moving Trey Lance. Or if you're talking about Kirk Cousins, they're 5-1. They're not trading off of Kirk Cousins unless they're getting the hometown boy from Marshall, Minnesota, that they think they're dreaming of, Lance to Justin Jefferson for the next decade. If you're going Cousins or Rodgers, that probably includes moving Trey Lance. And we don't know how they feel about Trey Lance. What would be the reaction, do you think, if in my mind, I think John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, if they win that 6th Lombardi, are made men in San Francisco with Jed and the York family. I think they can call their shots and be here as long as they want if they get that 6th Lombardi. So maybe that's what they're all about. And when I threw out that poll question, the number one answer from the fans was Aaron Rodgers, which is the right answer because he's probably the best player. Now, you said that Cousins is having the best year, and you're right, but Cousins also doesn't have any playoff wins on his resume that you can point to and say he can do it. Rodgers, it might be the best quarterback in the game, not named Mahomes or Allen. But you probably have to move Trey Lance to get him. And I don't know what the reaction would be. Would that be shortening the window too much? You know what I mean? And Cousins, a lot of people are in the chat here today are like, oh, God, no on Cousins. But I understand the good and the bad of Cousins. But what do you think? To me, if they knew that Trey Lance was a bust, let's say Kyle Shanahan has to have concrete thoughts about Trey Lance at this point that he's just not sharing. If he thinks that he's not good, and you could get Rodgers or Cousins and get down the road, wouldn't you do it? As opposed to just delaying your failure. If you really think that Trey's never going to make it based on what you saw.
Or even if you do think he's going to make it, but it's going to be in 3 years, you still do
right.
it. Rodgers.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. What if you think Trey's going to do it and he's going to make it, but it's going to be 2026 and you think, there's going to be a different head coach at that juncture?
And by the way, just pointing this out, Packers are playing on Sunday night the Bills. They're currently 12.5-point underdogs, which would make it, 4 losses in a row, and they'd go to 3-5. Minnesota. All of a sudden the division's falling away. Rodgers is talking about retirement at the end of the year. Maybe they try and at least get something for him. Just throwing it out there.
What's your read on that? These are bombshell type moves, but the Niners have already announced to everybody that they're in it this year. That's why they got Christian McCaffrey. So to me, that puts all of these other discussions at least worthy of discussing because they're in their go year and they're going for it despite their recent struggles.
I just feel like the thing that complicates so much of that stuff is like the dead money, right? And then like with a deal like Rodgers where he just got extended, even if Green Bay was like, hey, if Rodgers is like, hey, trade me to this team or I'm going to retire, like they're going to be stuck with so much dead money that the 49ers are in a spot where I just don't feel like they have the capital to really make that move. And, if I'm Green Bay, like what am I really seeing or hearing about Trey Lance that makes me feel like he's better than what I have in Jordan Love? To me, it's kind of the same thing. Like both guys that have great physical traits, have a, strong arm, but you haven't really seen the full package put together. So I agree. Like if the 49ers had the option to get any of those guys, like, you have to do it. And that to me comes back to, the overarching point, like, why did they make that move in the middle of a window where they felt like they could win a Super Bowl? Like, why would you trade up not only for a rookie quarterback, but the one that had the least experience out of all the quarterbacks being taken, the one that was probably going to take the longest to get comfortable and get acclimated to the NFL? And, unless they just got so blown away where they're like, hey, this window for the next 2 to 3 years is great, but we think Trey Lance can be the guy for the next 15 years. you have to feel like they had some level of conviction to make that pick in that window, because otherwise it makes absolutely no sense. And whatever your gripes are with Lynch or Shanahan, they have a pretty solid track record of building a team. They took a team that was basically ripped down to the studs with a few good pieces, and they built them into a team that's been a contender when healthy. But man, like there are days where I sit around thinking about that, and I'm like, how the hell did they think that this was the logical move to make? And it's easier said than done. From what we had heard, they did try to make a move for Rodgers, and Matt LaFleur is pretty much like, absolutely not. Like, that's not happening.
Stafford said he thought that he was going to the Niners. It almost feels like I've been in that situation where maybe like I can't really think of the right thing, but maybe like I'm bidding on something and I really, really want this one thing, and then I lose the bid, and then in my mind I'm kind of like, God damn it. Like I still want to get something. So you know what? Let's just take those same picks. Let's just throw them and let's just pick somebody in the draft. We have the third pick. We'll figure it out. That's almost what it felt like to me.
I honestly, I really truly believe the move that they wanted to make was Deshaun Watson before all the allegations came out and before all of the off the field things that he had attached with him and all the baggage that came with the things that he has done off the field. And I feel like it felt like that, like January, because if I remember correctly, the timeline, like February 2021 was kind of when that stuff came out. But January, it felt like that was really the move they wanted to make. And if they were willing to part with 2 first-round picks and trade up their first-round pick in another year, so basically mortgage 3 first-round picks into Trey Lance, you have to feel like they would have felt fine doing that for Deshaun Watson, who, again, before all of the off-the-field stuff that was brought into the light, appeared to just be an all-pro level quarterback who was still in his mid-20s that had 10 years of excellent football ahead of him. And it felt like once that was taken off the table due to the things that happened off the field, they were so committed to moving off of Jimmy, but they didn't have a direct, like, it felt like it wasn't their plan A, right? And like, I remember when they traded up, I was shocked when I got that notification that they had traded up with Miami. And I honestly wonder, if they just got to a spot, like, this is the thing that I can't make sense of, guys, right? It's like they were so committed to make this move, to move off of Jimmy, and then Stafford thought he was coming there. There were rumors about Watson. They ended up making the move for Trey Lance, and they were so committed to do it, but they still started Jimmy all of last season. He's still on the roster this season. So it's like, not only did you, pivot to taking this massive risk on the young rookie quarterback who had very minimal experience for somebody taken historically at that, high of a pick, but you also haven't gotten rid of the guy that you moved mountains to replace. So it's like, for all the good that they're doing building the roster, there's some of these decisions where it's just like so head scratching, where it's like, how can you be so good at 95% of this, but when it comes to the quarterback position, you guys are just like fumbling over each other and can't seem to figure it out. And I can't make sense of it. Like,
couple last minutes with Jordan Elliott. A couple things we want to hit before we go. Niners defense and then the Rams. The Niners, and this is an interesting stat, Niners have not allowed an opponent to rush for 100 yards in 15 consecutive games when Eric Armstead is on the field. This season, their opponents have gained over 100 yards on the ground in 3 of the 4 games that Armstead has missed. Is it as simple as they don't have Armstead? I mean, the 49er defense entered the game Sunday, giving up 255.8 yards per game. And Mahomes and company torched him for 529. Niners allowed 9.1 yards per play, the most they've allowed by a 49er defense going back to 1965, according to Nick Wagner from ESPN. Mahomes lit him up, 423 passing yards. It's the most surrendered since Kyle Shanahan became head coach. That's according to Akash from Niners Nation. I mean, is it as simple as, Armstead means so much to their defense, or is it the combination of all the injuries? Because, man, I mean, 49er defense looked good at the start of the game, and then it was just the entire second half. They couldn't stay within 5 yards of a Chiefs receiver. And then the thing that really jumped out is the explosives. I mean, it was just explosive play after explosive play after explosive play. And the 49ers could never get anywhere close to stopping any. They were not even in the picture on a couple of those plays. There was a play in the middle of the field where it was a third down play. They completed a pass in the middle of the field. There was nobody else on the TV screen when that chief player caught that ball. So is it all about Armstead? Why is the defense suddenly? Why is the bottom falling out on this defensive unit of D'Amico's?
I think it starts with him like immediately. So it's a conversation, and I don't know if battle is the right word to use, but that's a debate that I've been having for years with people, because I feel like Armstead is the perfect embodiment of a player who does so much if you're really dissecting every single play and watching all the intricacies and things that lead into the result of a play, compared to, he didn't have a sack in the box score, or he only had 1.5 tackles in this game. He does so much for that defense, both in the run game and in the pass game. And his presence on the interior, he's up there with the Chris Jones and the Aaron Donalds and the Jeffrey Simmons of the league, with the havoc that he puts on opposing offenses and the pressure that he applies. So, yes, I think it could be something as simple as that, but I also think it does kind of, coincide with the fact they lost Kinlaw as well, so they're stretched a little bit thinner. So now you're going from, we've seen when they had Kinlaw and they had Armstead, and then you had Hassan Ridgeway and Kevin Givens in more of a rotational role. Those guys were playing less snaps, and they were playing at a much higher efficiency. Now you have the guys who were originally slotted in to be your rotational depth pieces playing 90% of the snaps in a given game. And I just think they're worn down. I don't even think it's a talent issue, because I think that Givens and Ridgeway both had stretches this year where they looked really good. I just think they're so depleted on the interior that, just like you mentioned, they looked really good up front, but as the game wore on, they started to just get punished at the line of scrimmage. And we saw the same thing in Atlanta. And the 49ers have had some lapses defensively. They've had some blown coverages. They've had some games where they've gotten beat in the secondary. But over the last year or so, there are only a couple times when you can really feel like they got just bullied at the line of scrimmage. And I feel like it's been the last 2 weeks. I can't remember the last time where they had a couple games in a row where it just was like they just got beat up front. We can sit and talk about all the reasons they lost this game, but to me, it was the same reason that 90% of football teams lose games, whether it's Pop Warner, whether it's high school, college, or the NFL. If you lose the battle at the line of scrimmage, you're probably going to lose the football game. And the 49ers didn't just lose it. They got flat out dominated. And the only real saving grace was that they ran the ball pretty well. I thought that they did pretty good. But if we're talking about the four facets, run defense, pass rush, pass blocking, rushing offense, they really only hit 1 out of 4 the last couple of weeks. And it feels like until they get a guy like Armstead back, what's really going to change? I think they should sign a guy like Ndamukong Suh. I don't know what he's asking. I don't know if he wants to play, but it's a conversation you have to at least start having, because he's somebody who you could plug in right away that's going to make that defense better and stronger up front. And as much as I like Javon Kinlaw, and I think he is a game-breaking presence when he's there, it doesn't sound like they're confident with the way his knee's responding, and it doesn't sound like they're confident that they can count on getting him back. They need reinforcements. And to me, when a guy like Suh is out there, you bring him in, he has a history of coming in and making a difference, even if it is just in the run game. I don't think he's going to be the same pass rusher he once was. You don't need that. You just need somebody that's going to help you hold it down on the interior. So I think the outlook changes drastically. Let's say hypothetically they are able to convince Suh to come in, and you get a healthy Armstead back in a couple of weeks. I think we end up looking back on the last 2 weeks as an anomaly. Whereas if Armstead is continued, he stays hurt and you don't bring in reinforcements, what's going to change? I don't think it's a situation where it's just Kansas City's rushing attack is so good that the 49ers should be giving up 5.3 yards a carry to them. Pacheco's solid. They have a good offensive line, but the Niners shouldn't be getting pushed around like that. And I think that they need to make a move to insulate that unit, or else it's just going to be the definition of insanity. It's going to be the same thing week after week.
Yeah, so we still have not talked at all about the Rams game. So that's going to be my question, because that was my takeaway from the past 2 games. They got beat in the trenches. Atlanta ran the ball down their throat, 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards. And then on the other end, they weren't really getting them. The Atlanta's defense was actually pretty good. So yeah, they got beat in the trenches 2 weeks in a row. They looked like the less physical, less tough team, which is not what we're used to with the 49ers. How do you think that, rolling into a Rams team where they have not been able to get the run game going, it's basically just been Matthew Stafford actually being a little creepy how into Cooper Kupp he is. It's just been Cooper Kupp and Stafford and Higbee. So do you think that that's even do you think that concern's a little mitigated this week with the Rams not getting the run game going?
Historically, yeah, because that's one area. If you look at like the common denominator of the 49ers and Rams and the domination the Niners have had outside of the NFC Championship game the last few years, like they've done a really good job of winning at the line of scrimmage. And, it's funny because the Rams have actually had success stopping the 49ers run game as well, but it's been so overshadowed by the 49ers ability to pick up yards in space and have Deebo Samuel bowling over defenders. And get really creative with some of the ways they are getting the ball to their playmakers. So I don't think that physicality necessarily just translates to, the 49ers have ran the ball right down their throats, because it hasn't gone that way. In fact, that gap and a half scheme that the Rams have run under Raheem Morris and Brandon Staley has given the 49ers a lot of issues. But on the flip side, the 49ers defense has been so stout against the Rams, particularly since DeMeco Ryans has taken over, that it really makes them one-dimensional. And right now, the Rams, when they're one-dimensional, are a mess because they don't have the pieces to keep Matthew Stafford upright to throw the ball 45 times a game effectively. I think the loss of Andrew Whitworth was something that did not get talked about enough this past offseason. He was so important for that Rams team over the last 5+ years he was there. And it felt like that just kind of got swept under the rug because they had come off a Super Bowl win and they still had a lot of star talent. Joe Noteboom was the replacement left tackle. He was already having a rough year. Now they have Alaric Jackson there. Alaric Jackson had a pretty good game against the Panthers. He didn't give up a single pressure on, I think, 35 snaps, but he gave up 7 the week before against the Cowboys. And I think the Cowboys are a much closer unit to the 49ers if we're talking comparatively, for defensive fronts. So if the 49ers are able to slow that rushing attack down, which why would we have any reason to believe they can't with the way the Rams have been playing, we're going to get into a situation where that defensive line gets to tee off on Stafford again. And last time that happened, they got 28 pressures on 56 dropbacks. So I hate to put it this way because it feels like one of these days I'm going to say it and it's going to blow up in my face. But like every time the Niners need a get right game, the Rams are on the schedule and they have a get right game. It feels like this happens every single season. And until I see otherwise, I don't know why I would move off of that. Like, I think it just comes down to that whole, styles make fights things. And the Rams just don't match up well with the 49ers, even though they might have a better quarterback. They might have the best defensive player of this generation in Aaron Donald. Like, they have a very talented team. They just can't beat the 49ers in the regular season for whatever reason.
It's an amazing thing. The Rams have been totally one-dimensional offensively. They've ranked 31st in the NFL in rushing entering Week 7. According to Pro Football Focus, their O-line that finished the last year 7th in the league now ranks 29th in the league. So, I mean, no one's had more interceptions entering this week than Stafford, who has 8. Second year in a row, he's led all quarterbacks in that category. The Rams are among the league leaders in both giveaways and sacks allowed. LA comes into Week 7 ranked 25th in points per game. How important, last one I have for you on this one, but how important do you think complementary football is? Like, how in this game, do you think the 49ers, I guess the question is, we know the Rams are one-dimensional, likely can't run it, but how important is stopping the Rams offense on the Niners offense? Like, would you play ball control here, either by running it or short passing game, to try to keep the ball away from Stafford, to just try to give your defense a little bit of a shot in the arm? The 49er defense the last 2 weeks is really struggling, and it to me it seems like the lack of a run game is putting the defense. It's making the thin defense, the weaknesses of that thin defense show themselves that much more. I'd like to see a complementary football game where the 49ers win the time of possession decidedly, and then that impacts their ability to defend LA. How do you see the whole thing coming together on Sunday?
Honestly, if it was me, I would actually kind of do the opposite. I'd be uber aggressive early. I would take a few shots. I would, go deep into the playbook to where I'm, some of the stuff that he's probably been saving throughout the year. Because I think the 49ers' best chance of winning this game is making the Rams' offense one-dimensional and removing their ability to run the ball and set up play action and kind of neutralize the 49ers' pass rush getting upfield. And we've seen them be able to do that the last 2 times they've played at Levi's Stadium, the Monday night game last year. And the way that they were just able to get out to that early lead, get LA in a position where they're going to have to drop back. They're going to have to go empty. And what we've just seen that offense is not capable of consistently moving the ball against the 49ers defense when Nick Bosa and Charles Omenihu, Armstead and Ebukam and Drake Jackson are able to pin their ears back and get after Stafford. And, I think that it's very interesting how we spent so much time, looking at the 49ers offensive line going into the season, but the Rams were reigning Super Bowl champs. They were the reigning division champs. The Niners were going to have to go through them to get to where they want to be, winning that division in the playoffs. The Rams offensive line has kind of been a mess for the most part all season. And again, that was something that I don't want to say it was expected. It should have been this bad, but losing a guy like Whitworth, they don't really have an answer for what the 49ers can throw at them when they are one-dimensional. So if I'm the 49ers, I would step on the gas early. And yeah, I think you make a great point, Larry, because you do run the risk of, hey, if it doesn't work out, we've seen a lot of things not work out with the 49ers offense lately, then you are putting your defense in a position where they're maybe playing 40 minutes and they're out there for 75, 80 snaps. But I wouldn't feel great about playing this Rams team in a 1-4 game in the fourth quarter. I think the 49ers' best recipe for success is to build that lead early with the way the offense is played in the first half and let the pass rush carry them home towards the backstretch of the game there.
Good stuff, Rye. You got another one for Jordan before we say goodbye? Rye, you're muted.
Maybe very last one. Any guesses as to who they fill that roster spot with now that they released Tevin Coleman? Or type of player?
I would have to look because were there any other corresponding moves? Is there anybody else they put because Juszczyk's going on IR? Is he going on IR with the?
Well, I don't know if he's not going on IR.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I actually just saw that on Twitter.
And also, and then there's the other angle is McGlinchey too. I mean, there's a lot of people that feel that McGlinchey should be benched, and that that his body's so beat up at this point that they maybe should give him a week or two off to kind of regenerate. It will be interesting to see between McGlinchey, Greenlaw, and a couple of these guys who are super dinged with next week's bye week coming. Do they try to piggyback, steal an extra week of rest and R&R for those guys and maybe sit a couple guys this week who are kind of dinged up in the hopes that 2 weeks successively in succession off freshen them up for the second half? That to me, I'll be looking for later this week.
Oh, here's a thought David Lombardi put out is that it opens up a roster spot in case they decide to activate Jason Verrett before the PUP deadline next week. Could be.
That probably makes the most sense because that's somebody that they're going to need if they want to have a serious chance at contending. I'm not going to feel great about the 49ers chances as good as their defense is if they're relying on, Diamador Lore or Samuel Womack or Ambry Thomas to do the things that they were going to do with Emmanuel Moseley. And again, that's not a shot at any of those players. It's just Emmanuel Moseley. I thought Emmanuel Moseley was in the discussion for best number 2 corner in the league. And you can see the way the defense has changed. And I just think we've seen when you have to shift from being able to get creative with your pressures and leave your corners on an island and man versus, all right, well, now we're going to sit in quarters or cover 3 all game. That stuff gets picked apart by the good quarterbacks. And I just think that, having somebody like Verrett, if he's able to get right, all of a sudden the 49ers are right back to a similar position where they started where, okay, we can leave a healthy Verrett and a, healthy Mooney Ward on an island and get back to what we were doing so early on. Because ultimately what happens, guys, is people write it off as, the defense only looked good because they were playing, bad teams. And sure, Kansas City is much better than any opponent they've played. But I think a lot of that does get overlooked. And then you just get to a point where if the pass rush isn't absolutely dominating, the drop-off is huge on that back end. And if D'Amico Ryans is able to get back to what was working for them early on and get back to having that full playbook at his disposal and able to get because they got really creative with a lot of the pressures they've run. They're running NASCAR fronts where they have 4 defensive ends out there. We haven't really seen that.
I saw that.
Typically, Eric Armstead's healthy and on the field on third downs because how good he is. So they've done a good job adjusting that. They even had a front where they ran that overload front where they normally walk Fred Warner up to the B gap. But they actually had Samson Ebukam there. So they had 5 defensive linemen near the line of scrimmage, and they sent 5, but did so in a very creative way with the stunt they ran. So I just think that it's a lot easier to get into that kind of stuff when you have trust in your corners. And not to say that D'Amico Ryans doesn't trust those guys, but it'd be objectively untrue if we acted like there wasn't a massive difference between what Emmanuel Mosley brought to the table and what the group of names following him will bring to the table.
Nick on the chat says this guest is very knowledgeable, like a young Mort. Look at that, a young Mort, Chris Mortensen. That's high praise. Jimmy Ward and Charvarius Ward in coverage. They were targeted 12 times against Kansas City. They gave up 12 catches for 146 yards, 56 yards after the catch, a couple penalties to boot. Not a great game for either of the Ward brothers, even though they're not brothers. But Jimmy Ward and Charvarius Ward, they're gonna need to see more stuff, better production from both those guys. And I know neither of them are 100%, which also makes it, that much more challenging. But those guys need to play better than they did against Kansas City in the weeks ahead, and hopefully they'll get healthier as we go. Jordan, awesome stuff as usual. We'll let you go. Anything you want to promote that you're doing this week on Niners Nation as far as what you're writing, what you're covering? If people want to check you out between now and Sunday against the Rams, what kind of stuff are you putting out there on Niners Nation, and are you still in the decision making mode on that stuff?
Yeah, so I actually have one that I'm working on today that hopefully will be going out tomorrow. That is relative to the 49ers, but it's not on the field stuff. I attended an event last night at Levi's that they did for their 49ers Foundation, and they had a lot of the rookie class was there. And I had the chance to speak one-on-one with Spencer Burford and Drake Jackson for a little bit. And I think so often it's so easy to get caught up in, especially a week like this, how they played on Sunday and the result. And, my intention with the piece I'm writing is to highlight the human beings on that 49ers roster and how there is more to this game than just what happens on Sundays and the impact that these guys have. I got some great quotes from both about how they feel about their time in the Bay Area so far, how special they think the 49ers fan base is. And I've been very encouraged. I don't know if you guys have felt the same way with the, discussions you've had with some of these guys in the locker room, but I think that, the words culture and, the brick by brick and all that stuff gets thrown around a ton, but I think there is a tangible quality that you can feel that you can really put a pulse on with some of these guys where they're not only talented football players coming in, but you can just tell they're high character guys who are really buying in. I got to talk at length with Drake Jackson about, getting to work with some of these guys on the defensive line and how, he came from, a background at USC where he was in a stand-up outside backer, role, and he had to drop into coverage. And Samson Ebukam did a similar thing recently, coming from the Rams to the 49ers, and just how, they've been able to work together and stuff. So to summarize, I'm doing a piece on some of the charitable work they've been doing and some of the impact they hope to have in the community. And then I'm also going to be doing a piece about Drake Jackson, his transition, some of the early moments in his NFL career. He had a really cool story about his connection with Russell Wilson. He got his first NFL sack on Russell Wilson back in that Denver game. So if you want to change up from all the analysis and all the other stuff and you want something to feel good about, I got a great story about those two that should be going out tomorrow.
Awesome stuff, man. Thanks for joining us. We'll take a time out right here we'll do a little pay the bills and go walk through the live stream or through the chats for a couple minutes. But Jordan, we'll let you get on with your evening. Thanks for stopping by and great preview and discussion on Kansas City. And hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Anytime, guys. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
The great Jordan Elliot stopping by on the Krueg Show. All right, let's take a break right here. We'll pay our bills. We'll come back, give you our final thoughts after this.
Larry Krueger here for Telmetrics. Thanks to Casey Bateman and the good people at Telmetrics. If you're an occupational therapist, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, a chiropractor, a physical therapist of any kind, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in the clinical and the telehealth environments. So using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injury needs, or if you're a physical rehabilitation specialist of any kind, make sure you use telmetrics.co, Telmetrix.co. And thanks to Casey Bateman and all the good people at Telmetrics for being a proud sponsor of the Krueg. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Dan Coach Amelia, Emilio. Dan is a buddy, and he is a phenomenal retirement planning specialist. And you can contact him today at securemoney.com or at his number, 925-628-9966. There's a lot of uncertainty in our world right now, and you want to make sure that your money is secure. That is the key. Danny's got 25 years of experience, born and raised right here in the Bay Area, and he can help you get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. So give him a call, 925-628-9966. He'll make an appointment with you, and you can sit down. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a deal. He'll consult with you and come up with a strategy to get you going to where you want to be. Once again, 925-628-9966, securemoney.com on the web. And thanks to Tony Cassera and the good people at Cassera's Italian Menswear. They are housing the Krueg Show t-shirts, and they're a proud sponsor of the show as well. The Krueg Show t-shirt, the Krueg Show podcast t-shirt is available there at their store in Dublin. Their address is 7372 San Ramon Road in Dublin, California. And go see Tony Cassera and get yourself a Krueg Show t-shirt and support the show. And special thanks to our sponsor, New York Style Italian Sausage. That's right, NewYorkStyleSausage.com is their website. Phenomenal product, whether it's the breakfast sausage, the Italian mild, the Italian spicy, the chorizo. You cannot go wrong with New York Style Italian Sausage. Once again, NewYorkStyleSausage.com. Often imitated, never equaled.
We grew up with a Sunday dinner. That means no matter how busy you were, no matter where the hell you were, you came to dinner on a Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday dinner without sausage, it's like a church without God. You know, how can you go to church if you don't believe in God? You know, and along with the sausage also became the discussions. That was discussion night. You know, it wasn't a typical family that you sit there and you're quiet, you know, and you don't talk with a mouthful. Oh, no, man. Italians talk when they're eating. Italians even talk when they're sleeping. And definitely we talk with our hands. So if we can't express it through our mouth, through our lips, we express it with our hands. So, and that's what sausage is, really. It's an expression, you know, that life is good.
So New York Style Sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, you know, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never going to deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it. Guaranteed.
Down the home stretch on the Krueg Show, and thanks to Renzo 82 donates 99 cents to just say, hey, I'm Renzo 82 and I mean business. Renzo, thanks for being in the chat. Nick on the chat says the wink from,
It's all about the wink.
It's all about the wink there at the end. Then we've got this one, Digital True. Dang, Larry, now I want sausage. New York style sausage is a baller. Actually, love that stuff, of course. I'm good to smoked Italian chicken sausage. I don't know if they have that, but they have a bunch of different options. G-Rod, New York style sausage. Okay, then we have another one in here that said that the Rams signed Tevin Coleman. Is that true?
I didn't see that.
That would be interesting. Lots of teams do sign players trying to get intel. So maybe that is a move by the Rams looking for intel.
I don't see it. I don't see it on Twitter. I searched it on Twitter. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I guess with the presence of McCaffrey, there was no need for Tevin Coleman. As simple as that, really, huh?
Yeah, and I think, the reports are that they're likely to, like, if he doesn't get picked up by somebody, they're likely to re-sign him to the practice squad. So
good stuff. Thanks to everybody who joined the chat, and hope you enjoyed the hour plus with Jordan Elliot. We are going to talk more about the Rams coming up here at 6:00. We've got a Ram reporter making her debut on the Krueg show, and her name is Claudio Gestro from KWHY. So she's going to stop by at 6:00, and we'll get her thoughts on the matchup ahead between the Rams and the 49ers. So 90 minutes from now, we'll talk a little bit with Claudia. And then tonight, Warriors back on the hardwood. Already did the Locked On Warrior podcast with Cy today. He will be joining us, as will Carl, as will Frank, as will hopefully Danny and Rye, and maybe even Barry a Baller. So we got a full house tonight. We'll talk a lot of Warrior basketball after the game and get your thoughts on the Warriors. And then tomorrow we're back in Santa Clara talking more Niner football. Ryan, on your way out the door, what was your number one takeaway from our live stream today with Jordan Elliot?
That he calmed me down. He's a very rational guy. But also I don't know. I thought that I sort of thought that he was going to just completely shoot down like all of the Brady, all of that
the quarterback
kind of
conjecture. But it's actually pretty interesting. And there may be something there. Who knows?
Yeah. I think he kind of like he's like, wait, okay. It's not that, it's like not impossible is I think kind of what he was thinking. That's kind of what we're thinking as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would say Kirk Cousins seems very unlikely. Why? Because he's got, a 5-1 record, and are they looking to pivot off of Kirk Cousins? And then at this point, I think there's enough people that would be skeptical about Cousins and what he is. And then there would, I think almost invariably, you can't go after Kirk Cousins and have Trey. So I would imagine Trey would have to be the compensation for Kirk Cousins. And then you've got a draft pick that was, you traded all this draft capital to take this young quarterback third overall. You didn't give him hardly any opportunity, and now you're going to pair him off in a trade for a quarterback that doesn't really have any big playoff wins to his credit. That one, I think, could dial up the heat indirectly on Shanahan and Lynch quite a bit. So there's that I think is unlikely. Then there's the Rodgers situation, and I think Green Bay is going to lose again to Buffalo, and they have no guarantee that they're going to have Rodgers beyond this year. But I can't think that the Green Bay organization, which views the Niners as such a rival, would hand Rodgers to the 49ers without Trey Lance coming back. And then you'd run the risk of, what if you had 1 year or 2 years of Aaron Rodgers and you're giving away 15 years of Trey Lance to a team in your own conference? That one right there could come back to haunt you if Trey Lance fulfills the potential that many people feel like he possesses. So I think that one seems unlikely, despite the fact that if I'm Green Bay, I'd be all ears. Your season might be done. You could get off of a 38-year-old quarterback who's at the end of the run for a brand new quarterback and maybe have things go well for you. There's that. Then there's the Brady angle. And I think the Brady angle is much more viable because I think he seems like he's done in Tampa. They may be done with him, and they don't have a quarterback beyond this year that they can go to. So if they move Brady, I could see a Brady for Garoppolo swap. I think it would play well with the 49ers. I think it might play well in Tampa. So that one to me makes the most sense. And I think if you said viability, which one's viable? I think that one's the most viable. So we'll see. Maybe none of them, but that one seems the most viable. All right. Join us at 6. It should be fun and should be a good time. I also contacted Vish, and so Vish just called me back. So we'll see when Vish wants to get together, but we may do a live stream with Vish as well. So that would be cool. And if we do that, that may be coming up here shortly. So stay tuned for more updates on the Krueg Show. If you're in the chat right now, hit like and subscribe. We'd love to have you as a regular Krueg Show subscriber, and you can be a team member as well by hitting join at YouTube. But that does it for us. Hope everybody has a great afternoon. We'll see you in a bit on the Krueg Show.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you won't get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled.